I'm doing great today. How are you?
Oh, outstanding. Looks like a
Lovely
cool
to
place
hear.
for you. Yep. And I don't think I've said hi to Sergeant York yet. How you doing, Jeremy?
Hello, everyone. How's everyone tonight?
All
And
right,
Lauren
we're
and
on
Kathleen.
YouTube.
Awesome. Well, let's get going then. I want to welcome everybody to our meeting. Just a quick reminder, if it's at all possible, it's great that you're here. If you can be here on video, great. If you can't, we certainly understand. It's always better if you are, but if you're not, we're just glad that you're here in any form whatsoever. We'll call the meeting to order and ask if we have any citizens' comments.
No citizens.
All right. Then like to move a motion to approve the minutes from the February 9th meeting. Robert, and second, Beth. Any discussion? No. All right. All in favor? All
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? All right. So that was all in favor. And we're up to correspondence now, Molly.
I actually do have some correspondence. And I'm not sure if everyone else can see, but we're supposed to be closed captioning these meetings now, and down the bottom is the closed captioning. So I hope it doesn't disturb. So we have a couple of notes. We have a donation actually that we're going to approve later, came with a thank you note to say we would like to send in this donation in honor of the work of Erin Corbett, who does work with their child. We greatly appreciate her working with them. We also have, we did a video for the Special Olympics. I don't know if anybody saw Scott and Melissa making snow angels in the snow. Gosh, I don't even know. When was that? A month or so ago?
It was cold.
It was cold. So the thank you note reads, hello, I wanted to take this opportunity to personally thank everyone at Madison Youth and Family Services for the generous gift towards the Angels for Athletes campaign in support of Special Olympics Connecticut. The video we shared was amazing and put a huge smile on my face. Your gift supports our year-round sports, health, and fitness programs. I appreciate your generosity and confidence in us to provide life-changing programs to athletes of all abilities. The support you've provided at this critical time is nothing short of inspiring. Thank you for helping us transform lives and create a better world by fostering acceptance and inclusion. So, and the last correspondence is also a thank you from the Polson staff for the Heart campaign that the peer helpers did at Polson. So it says, to all our wonderful, generous, thoughtful peer helpers, did you know the phrase thank you comes from the words meaning to think, translated as I will remember what you did for me. If that's the case, there can be no better phrase than thank you for all you've done for the faculty and staff of Polson. Thank you for the cards written to each and every staff member. They were thoughtful, colorful, and best of all, personalized. Thank you for the gift cards to various area retailers. Right after we got them, we heard staff excitedly asking each other, what did you get? How about you? And thank you for the wooden hearts that touched our hearts so immediately and thoroughly. They are gorgeous and so well made. Who knew you were artists too? Thank you for the video honoring our faculty and staff. We know it must have taken so much time, and the sentiment behind it means more than you'll know. We also thank you for your positive contributions to the climate of Polson. Knowing you are there to redirect and connect with kids who need support is reassuring for everyone. So thank you. We will remember what you did for us always. Really nice letter.
Agreed. That was beautiful. Andrea, do you have a treasurer's report for us?
Yes. Hi, everybody. The Sunshine Fund has a balance of $160. Members may drop off their voluntary donations at the Madison Youth and Family Service Office. And I'd like to ask for a motion to approve 3 donations. The first one is a anonymous donation of $150, honoring the work of Erin Corbett. A $10,000 donation from Neighbor to Neighbor for the COVID Relief Fund. Another $10,000 donation from Neighbor to Neighbor for the discretionary fund.
So can we get a motion to approve? I think we can put these all together into one motion, and then we can have a discussion about the various components of them. So can I get a motion? Beth, and a second? Lauren, and can we, we'll open it up for some discussion. Scott, did you want to speak a little bit to the, I think we've already heard a little bit about the Erin Corbett one. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that, but the Neighbor to Neighbors could certainly use a little bit clarification.
Yeah. So it's such a nice thing to have to continually do. I would mention so that the Erin Corbett donation was a family that Erin worked with at the in her school-based work, and and it's kind of funny because I think we don't charge fees for our school-based work, and this family felt like, based on everything that she had been able to do, that they wanted to acknowledge that work. And we it went into our general donation fund, and we actually asked Erin how she would want to spend it, and so I don't think she's told us yet, but it'll be up to her as to what need it meets here at the agency. The 2 Neighbor to Neighbor donations, there's a $10,000 donation for our COVID impact program. That's the program we've been running since April. And this will bring the total funding of that program to $110,000. I had said at the Board of Selectmen meeting this morning, actually in error, that we had crossed the $100,000 mark already in total assistance. That's not true. We're still just a little shy of that. We did make some changes to that program. I had a couple of conversations with Lori Heflin from Neighbor to Neighbor. Our concern was that if, as the funding as we're now seeing kind of the end, and that we fund a program such as this to the amount that they have, we felt like for the remaining dollars that we have, we really wanted to make sure we were saving that, or maybe just keeping it special for families maybe that hadn't applied at all or had applied very little, because this is a program where families did apply multiple times during the course of the pandemic, and that was something Neighbor to Neighbor was actually wanting. So it was our recommendation to Neighbor to Neighbor to limit the amount of overall applications to 3 per household. And we felt like that was really a fair and I think an efficient way of stretching the dollars. And they agreed. We made a couple of other minor tweaks as well in terms of how we're determining the eligibility for some families. And they were happy with what we were doing. And so donated another $10,000 for the program. And the other $10,000 that's on here, that is money that goes to the discretionary fund. That's a fund that we've kept for quite a long time, number of years. And that really helps us for special needs of families as they come up. So if we don't have another resource or another program to connect someone to, we can turn to this fund. So this has helped people with critical repairs to their homes. It helps sustain people in their homes when there's been damage or something that's been a chronic problem that they couldn't fix. It's helped to repair roofs. It's helped repair septic systems, making houses safe in some cases. So it's, and again, like when these needs come up, we reach out to Neighbor and tell, without giving them a name, but describe a situation, make sure that they're on board with how we're using the fund. They typically agree. Sometimes they ask some follow-up questions or give us some feedback, but that's how we use that fund. And please accept it.
Any other discussion or comments other than, I'd like to express my continued thanks to Neighbor to Neighbor for funding these and for trusting MYFS with administering them. All right, seeing no further discussion, let's go ahead and vote then. All in favor of accepting the motion? All opposed? And any abstentions? All right, so the motion passes. The next item on our agenda is a discussion of the recent report that a consultant did regarding Madison Youth and Family Services. There's a subcommittee of members that have met with Scott and already begun kind of going a little bit deeper into that document. Scott had mailed us all a copy of it. It's a pretty hefty report to go through. Hopefully you were at least able to go through the top line on it, the executive summary, if you weren't, it didn't go into the deep body of it. But a lot of really insightful information there. I thought it really painted Madison Youth and Family Services in a really positive light. There was also a report that was given back out to the Board of Selectmen. When was that, Scott? Was that a week ago? Or
last week. Yep.
Yeah, and again, I thought that the points that were made in there were that a lot of the things that are going on at Madison Youth and Family Services are in the right direction, and we're doing some things that are different than many of the other towns. And the author of the report even went so far as to say that she had gone back to her own town and asked them why they're not doing some of the things that we're doing in Madison, which I thought was a heck of a vote of confidence. But I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who's going to kind of walk us through the report.
I know, Dave, you're doing a really good job.
I tried not to steal any of your thunder, and I hope I did.
That's all right.
All right.
So just again, nice to see everybody. Just out of curiosity, how many people were able to see the Board of Selectmen presentation last Monday? So a few people. And it was recorded, so if you do want to watch it, I don't actually suggest that you watch it. I don't think the consultant did a particularly good job that night of describing her findings and going through the report. The report's excellent. I think very thorough, overall, well-written, readable. And I think even if the findings weren't so supportive of us, I would have to say it was still a thorough report. She, for whatever it was worth, she just wasn't for that particular meeting. So anyway, I do want to walk people through this. So I do have a screen share, a summary, and just walk people through. I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on these things, but these points are important. And I think one of the reasons why it's necessary to go through it more, that each of you have a really good understanding of what was in the report. And I think, as board members, your ability to talk about that information, share it, and there may be aspects of it that each of you find, more memorable or more important, and that's fine. Just as board members, this was a really critical evaluation of us, and I think helps to create some foundation for other discussions here, which I'll get into. Where the heck is it? Oh, so you know what? Can I screen? Oh, yes, here it is. Sorry.
I have to tell you that reading your words on screen is just the highlight of the meeting for me.
Oh, thank you.
You can turn off the captions on your screen, right?
I wouldn't want to.
Okay.
Well, how do you do that?
Down at the bottom where it says CC live transcript.
All All right, I'll find
closed
it.
caption, like near where it says screen share and participants and everything?
Yeah, I lost some of that because of the
Oh,
when I screen shared, but that's fine. We'll work it out. Thank you. So off the top, this was requested officially by Peggy Lyons. The idea actually was generated by Tom Banish. You know, as I continued to bring up things that I felt we wanted to address and grow, whether that was space or positions. And so the idea came that really we needed some formal backup, a study of some kind that would evaluate our model, what we're doing, our needs, our effectiveness, those kind of things. And, you know, Peggy, as we were trying to get that parent support counseling position expanded last year, Peggy felt like it was time to do the study and was able to get it into the budget. That was the critical piece. So we didn't get our hours, but we did get this into the budget last year. As we were, you know, coming into the summer, I actually had a conversation with her about whether or not we should follow through with it. As you all know, we were in a pandemic. Our resources were pretty stretched. So the idea of going through this level of evaluation at this time didn't feel particularly timely. And, you know, I remember the conversation very clearly. And what she said was, you know, well, do you really want to kick it down the road more? And the answer to that was no. I mean, we kicked it down the road so many times, like we couldn't even see it down the road anymore. Like, you know, so it was time. And we sucked it up. It was, I'm going to tell you all very honestly, it was difficult sometimes because we were needing to, you know, follow up on crises or phone calls with families on days where we needed to get information to her. And so that information was coming, you know, late in the day, early in the morning, some evenings that people were working and compiling things. You know, tougher because sometimes we were working remotely and we didn't have access to some of the drives here. So people, you know, would come in, take, you know, download things and take them back. This was a lot of work for Sharon, who was doing a lot of the compiling, Angela as well. So tough timing. And I'll talk a little bit about where it actually favored us as well. The purpose of the study was to look at the agent's capacity, its efficiency, its role in the community, and the increasing demand on our programs and services. You know, that was a statement that we came up with collaboratively with Peggy as well as the evaluator Loretta. We were going to be looking at some very key areas around mostly around our clinical services, but it was an evaluation of our entire agency. There were questions, very clear questions going in. Were there duplications or redundancy within our school-based programming? Was there any duplication or competition in the community? Those were questions that we heard quite a bit, both from Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. Like, are we competing with the private sector of therapists in town? They wanted an evaluation of the relative cost effectiveness and really to compare us to youth service bureaus in other towns. So really the method was, you know, let's look at what we're doing and then pick a number of towns. At one point they were going to do like 6, which was, I think, just too many. We were able to narrow the list down to 4. It was conducted by Loretta J. from CCM. And she was great. She was absolutely wonderful to work with. And again, not because of the outcome of the study, but, you know, she asked a lot of hard questions, a lot of follow-up questions. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth, you know, always trying to clarify things if she didn't quite, you know, she didn't understand what we were saying or what the data was supposed to say. She'd be back with us very quickly. So in terms of the overview of the study, we picked 4 towns with similar characteristics to Madison. They all had to have a youth service bureau, a similar population size. They looked at the median household income, free and reduced lunch rate. So the district reference group, or the DRG, that's a comparison of the, you know, how schools compare to each other. So similar schools are within the same DRG, and also looked at comparison of the local spending per student. And through some metrics, there was the selection of Avon, Glastonbury, Guilford, and Wilton. Now Glastonbury is a much bigger town than us. However, they had a YSB that was very similar to what we're doing with a fair amount of clinical services. And to compare us, to look at how their town ensures that its youth mental health needs were being met. And, if there were town employees, that were being in the additional town. So they reached out to these town employees or people within these towns to interview them, and they all got the same questions to answer in each of the towns. So the purpose was to assess all of our operations and the needs, and all this was for the purpose of informing our policy and our funding decisions. And Claire, it was not to necessarily, this one was not intended to address or assess our effectiveness. So there weren't really any, client surveys that were done or more data collected from town residents about our services. That was a question that was raised, but again, within the scope of what we needed to do, we didn't include that part. So she collected, reviewed, and analyzed a lot of paper. There were reports that we were asked to generate specific for, certain questions, but we also provided, older memos, older assessments that we had, quantitative data, fiscal data. She did a number of in-person and phone and video chats and email interviews with people that included our folks, town employees, a number of school staff, including school administrators, as well as school counseling staff, community stakeholders, both local and regional behavioral health providers, and of course, those other YSBs. The process, it was conducted over several months. Felt like forever, late summer and into December. A lot of, as I said, a lot of follow-up contacts, and did certainly put a lot of strain on us during this time. The outcomes, well, one of the big ones, and hopefully everyone was able to at least get through the executive summary. And then if you wanted to go into more detail with the rest of it, that's certainly fine. But the big outcome, it really, it validated the need for the services. So a part of the study, Loretta, did some research, and I think no surprise to any one of us. I mean, the trends for the need for mental health services and mental health issues in general have been rising for the youth for a number of years, even before the pandemic. And this is a national trend, this is a statewide trend, and this is certainly a local trend. A lot of concerns currently for risk for substance abuse, as well as the need for more suicide prevention. Suicide rates have been going up in a number of populations, including youth. She highlighted the risk for limiting services or outsourcing. And I'll get into this when they did the comparison in other towns. There were different approaches to youth mental health that were not, I think, received well by certain people in towns. And again, we'll get into that in a minute. A huge value, highlighting a huge value in the ability of a town or a region to coordinate services, particularly between systems like school and town. We're able to validate a lack of accessible and affordable mental health services located in and around Madison, other than us. This was key. We hear all the time when parents call us, I can't find other providers. I have a list of providers. I'm calling them. They're not calling me back. They don't treat youth. They won't take my insurance. They won't take any insurance. They can't see me for a long time. So we always heard that. And part of why we continue to insist on developing our capacity to provide mental health services was exactly that. There were no other places that were taking people. And for some of you, if you've been around Madison, like Yale had a satellite office out here for a little while, like maybe probably about 10 years ago now, but fairly expensive, hard to get in. It was nice. It was right downtown, but, and it didn't last long. It was here for maybe a couple of years and then gone. So we knew that. So Loretta posed as a parent and started calling providers. And this is in the report. very quickly whittled down to a very small number of people who would see youth. And so where you think you have this huge, network of private practice therapists, which you do, it's like therapists on the shoreline, I hate to say it, but they're like a dime a dozen, there's hundreds of them. But there are not a sufficient amount that can see kids. And so she was able to validate that. She actually also, it's in the report, she tried to go through Infoline, which is like the state, calling clearinghouse for resources, and got lost in that. Like, she wound up getting, her call got mixed around and then dropped. So her, and the report was, if I were a parent trying to find resources in town and I didn't have the youth services to go to, this would have been my experience. So that was a really key piece for us, again, validating why we did what we did. And I think, and this is where the pandemic, I thought that the timing was, I don't want to say favored us, because pandemics don't favor anybody. But so she was doing her evaluation of us during the pandemic. So there were days she was talking to us and we could actually give her anecdotal information as to what we were doing. It also, she was evaluating us during a time where we had a youth suicide. So she was talking with us actually a day after we were making plans to support the school as well as the family, and again, could hear and see the thoughtfulness that we put into that. And again, the collaboration, it's not just us, it's the school system responding, and it's us responding to the needs of those moments. And then, so like she was able to see how we handle critical incidences, as well as how the school was working with us to meet that need. And of course, working with us over this past year, how we were responding to the pandemic and the explosion of needs, the youth mental health needs that have come up during this time, and what that was like. So by comparison, Wilton was actually phasing out their part-time YSB work. It's in the study, but essentially they had like two part-time people. One had retired, one was sort of hanging on. But even, and it's in the study, even as they were doing this, they were very quickly regretting for concern about how mental health needs were going to be tracked, how they were going to be met. Now they did have this for Wilton. They have like two larger mental health child guidance clinics. Like Wheeler's one, I think. I'm blanking on the other one. And very sound models, good systems, but external systems. So not the sense of the people that she spoke to was, we have this, but we don't always know, how they're handling families, how they're responding to certain mental health needs, other than being in existence. So Avon, they had a single part-time worker. They do no clinical, again, because they do have mental health resources in that community. And this was interesting. They had, I guess a year or so ago, eliminated school social workers. No one should ever eliminate school social workers. But they did for cost reasons, as I understand. I don't know that specifically, but I'm assuming that's what was the reason. Again, quickly regretted that. And as Loretta was talking to people within that, within the town, certainly the people that were, administrators and people that were dealing with these things, they did actually have to go out and get a large federal grant to help build capacity for a school-based model. And what's interesting is, like, and Loretta said, like, do you know about this grant? And, I honestly, I had not heard of it, but I did look into it. And it's not something that we would have been eligible for one, because we've already developed the system that they are trying to develop with the grant. So we're already there in sustaining the model that we have. But, the one other key observation she made was that the school had this huge grant, and they were really developing a nice mental health response team and a capacity to meet those needs. And yet the people she talked to on the town side and the YSB side didn't know. Like, she was informing them of this huge initiative the school was taking. So again, like the disconnect between school and town was evident, at least in that particular case. She found that we compared very favorably to Glastonbury. They're a little bit bigger in terms of their clinical work, also very integrated into the school system. They collect no revenue. Everything that they do is free to the people that they provide it to, which is nice. It's a nice service. However, they're also not making any money back to help offset costs to the town. And of course, we compared very favorably to Guilford because, quite frankly, it was Guilford that was helping us quite a bit and giving us ideas and resources that they used in developing their clinical services. So, we certainly modeled a lot of what we do or have done after them, as they have also borrowed some things from us over time, mostly on the prevention side. So compared favorably there. Validation of the model. We compared favorably to the other towns. She highlighted, the level of comprehensive services, so full spectrum, that we're working on the prevention side and integrated in the school, doing health initiatives, integrated into health classes, integrated into the school day, and on the other end, of course, the clinical services and intervention and social services. Highlighted the benefits of collaboration and comparing us to those other towns. The people that she reached out to in terms of other stakeholders, administrators in the school, our very own police liaison, a pediatrician, she had reached out to area people, and everyone just, spoke very highly of our staff, but also knowing that we were there. Like the big takeaway was, they knew that they could turn to us for clinical services, for programming, for support, and we would show up. Validated the fact that we were cost effective, the fact that we're collecting revenue, which, by the way, since we're doing it through third party, it's not really hurting families who can use their insurance. It's actually benefiting families to be able to use their insurance and not have to just pay a fee. But that revenue also helps us to offset costs to the town, and found us very responsive to community needs. So where there's a cost of not providing services, so what happens in towns where you don't have places to go to meet mental health needs, or you don't have a lot of prevention going on, you have indications of public health issues and things getting worse and families getting worse, which that's bad enough, but of course there's costs related to that, and police work potentially, and emergency services, extra help and extra services in schools to help students. So there's, where you don't have anybody providing those services, it falls through, in some cases, through the cracks. They found that there were no duplication or redundancies within the system, and this too was really huge. So she spent time talking with school administrators and us, and was able to see the differences in our school-based roles. So our school-based clinicians are not the same as school social workers. They're not the same as guidance counselors. And I think, again, the report was able to show that, or she was able to validate those differences. And was able to highlight the benefits of having our staff and our model being different from the school. So, that our perception is as neutral and safe, so that, students who see us don't have some of their mental health history or issues collected somewhere that might be in an educational record, that we're focused on mental health. We're licensed mental health professionals, as if we were practicing in the community, because we are. The connection back into the community. So we're bringing community resources and knowledge of the community into the school, as much as our school-based clinicians will bring what's happening in the school and the trends and the needs back to our staff here. And again, it's cost effective. The cost effectiveness of our school-based people, by the way, are because we pay them less than actual school employees. And there's some factors and reasons for that. Most have to do with, that the school folks are collectively bargained through labor unions. We are unaffiliated workers for the town. And there's some differences in benefits and things like that. When if anyone got to this into the study, that did certainly raise some eyebrows here, but not necessarily in a very negative way. Like, it wasn't news to our school-based folks that they get paid less, but there were a lot of benefits on the other side to doing their work under the auspices of the town. We do have a very good, medical health benefits and things like that. We have retirement savings and different plans. And so there are definitely upsides to doing the work under the town versus the school. So the cost the fact that people were being paid more for similar work at the school did not really hit anybody too hard here. It did raise some eyebrows, and it is food for us to continue to think about, how their rate of pay is. It supported our very directly our request to expand the parent support counseling. There was support for that. In general, I think support for our overall approach that we're planful. You can see over our different timelines and the history of our agency that we've been able to do a lot of staffing changes and reorganizing, whether that's to meet a community need, programmatic need, or sometimes because we have people that are retiring and needing to shift, to meet our mission to do the work. And she supported our need for more agency space. And this part was clear in the Board of Selectmen presentation. And actually, Al Goldberg asked her the question because there was a discussion earlier in the Board of Selectmen meeting that had just to do with the town facility study. And clearly, we were pointed out as in need of more space in that part of the Board of Selectmen meeting. So Al asked her, is that clear in this study? And she said yes, and then spoke to that. So again, very grateful for that. That's something we've been talking about for a long time. Where we need to improve. So in terms of those outcomes, our data collection, I was saying that she had to follow up with us a number of times. Sometimes it was to clarify data. And since we have evolved over time, our methods of collecting data have shifted. So when she was asking us for numbers, we might have taken some numbers that might represent, say, the people that we're reaching out to, but not so much counting as formal clinical clients. We are doing electronic records. So when we shifted to that 3 years ago, there's data now that we can mine out of our electronic records that we didn't used to have to. So we were pulling data from different places, and it didn't always match. Very similar, but it didn't always match. And that was something that was very bothersome to Loretta, and quite rightly so. So, and it was a good process for us because it forced us to look at, okay, so where are these numbers coming from? How do we feel good that, they're reflective and accurate? And going through that, we felt, when we did provide her with some of the reports that we did in the end, they were very accurate. And I think represented pieces of data that were important to help make, some of her conclusions and observations. That said, and I brought this up here, we need to work on our data collection and make that better for people. She made some recommendations on our website, which is actually the town website. It's our web page. Interestingly enough, we've been working on that forever. And, as she was telling us to put more resources on our webpage, we had vetted and gone through a whole process. And so we were ready to put new resources on our webpage, and we did. So we can check that one off. The communication with the school system. So part of the feedback that was actually pretty strong in some cases was that we had some programs and maybe some staffing that certain people at the school felt they were not being communicated well around. And one that sort of stood out was when we had placed an intern at Brown School last year. At Brown, when they shifted the middle school model, we had our school-based clinician, our middle school-based clinician, Taylor, go full-time at Polson. So instead of, she used to split between the two middle schools, it just made sense for a lot of reasons to put her just at Polson. As Brown was starting the new 4-5 model, we had reached out to Frank Henderson and, is there anything we can do? I think it was actually either his idea or somebody's idea there asking for more counseling help, and what we could, well, we had a resource in terms of an intern. We didn't have a staffing resource. So anyway, we had an intern there, and the intern, as it turned out, at times had to ask people at the school, particularly the school counselor at Brown, for a lot of support. So that came out in the report that there were times where that felt like we were relying too much on Brown School to supervise or support our intern. I will tell you, I'll tell you about the feedback I got from the admin council when we talked about that part, but there was that feedback. Training was another big piece. She felt, that while we all here have done a lot of trauma-informed training, trauma training, she felt like maybe we would benefit from, finding more of a single model of trauma training that, so we'd have a similar background with all of our staff. Having talked with us through the pandemic, there was a recommendation for vicarious trauma training. At some level, I think she could tell that we were all carrying a lot of stress of what was happening here, as well as what was happening in our own lives. So certainly that was a good recommendation. Almost there, folks. Hang in. In terms of our next step, so like we're now moving towards getting some feedback, getting this out a little bit more in the public. I don't know that there'll be a huge interest. This is not going to wind up on the bestseller list or any bestseller list. But nonetheless, it's on our webpage, and we want to tell people that it's there and refer them to see and learn more about us. I did meet, so I had a nice discussion with the superintendent, Dr. Cook, who invited me to the admin council. So I did that last week. So that's all the school administrators. I saw Frank Henderson for the first time since he had been out. So that was kind of nice for me to see him. I'm a big fan of Frank's, and he was pretty sick for a while. So it was just good to see him. Talked with all of them. They did not feel the communication was quite as bad as it maybe was reflected in the study. And I found that interesting. I think, they're almost defensive, that it was not quite as bad as it was portrayed. And that's fine. I mean, I think, she may have talked to different resources that maybe, or different sources that maybe Loretta didn't quite, that Loretta did, but they didn't quite know. I don't know. But I mean, we all agree the communication is key. We need to keep up doing what we're doing. And I'll track back if I can find other ways of reaching out to some of the people where that feedback came from, and just make sure we're paying attention to it. Angela really is very much on the ball when it comes to supervising the people that are at the schools. And we're lucky because we have a couple of very seasoned school-based clinicians, Taylor and Aaron, who are very well known at the schools, and I think, work pretty seamlessly, which is a lot to ask when you're in somebody else's system or in somebody else's building. So, so we do want to be keeping an eye on that. And then, if there are things we got to tweak, we'll tweak them. In terms of where we go from here with the study, there were questions about, well, should we look at that qualitative piece? What's the effectiveness of our services? Might that look like maybe surveying? I mean, we don't have the capacity, quite frankly, to do that now, but that might be something that we look at. And maybe we just, as we think about our data system, develop more capacity around surveying as a part of that process. We want to continue to work with stakeholders, work with the town to modify our clinical positions. And so this is where it's going to get interesting. I've talked with some people here, and we can't do anything in this budget year, but I think the study reinforces what we've been asking for. And so my intention is to follow up with conversations. We'll put some numbers down and maybe have some ideas around how positions might evolve, and see where that takes us. When I was meeting with the administrators, I brought up the question of would they entertain the idea of some cost sharing, and as you can imagine, they didn't jump up and say yes, we can't wait to do that. Most of them sort of politely nodded their heads, but the important thing was to get the question out there, and that maybe wasn't the forum to really to get into it, and certainly it's premature, but that's going to be a step in this. I think as if I'm asking for us to develop more programming or change some of these positions, I think the town is going to say, well, what's the school going to do? And that brings us back to that question. So we'll have to stay tuned for that. I invited actually all of you, anyone who could make it, and we held a little bit of a focus group last Tuesday. And for the few of you that were able to make that, that was a really lively and helpful conversation for me. What was interesting from my perspective was, as we started to talk about the study, we pivoted very quickly to talking about data, because I think that's the next step. I think we went to, yeah, that's a really good study, and let's get to work. And so we started talking about what we collect, how we collect it, and I think I'm interested in inviting another focus group and maybe thinking about a handful of meetings over the next month or so, and just maybe to drill down on the question of what areas would people want to know that would reflect our having our worth, our effectiveness, those kind of things, because those conversations are really helpful to me in figuring out. We do collect quite a bit of data. The question is, how do we then use it and mine it and get it out so it's digestible? And with that, I'm going to shut up for a second because I'm losing my voice. I'm going to stop sharing this. Thoughts? Well, people that were at the focus group, is that an accurate portrayal of our conversation? I know that was a lot of talking. I apologize for that, but hopefully that was helpful to understand what the study was about. But thoughts, questions on the study, on any part of it, reactions?
I want to just offer some thanks to your staff. I know how, in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of the other crises they were dealing with on a daily basis, they were asked to take time, sit down, meet with Loretta, and to also go dig up data for her as well. And there's a lot of extra work that was placed on their plates, and just wanted to make sure that they heard our thanks for that. And to you as well. Yeah.
Hopefully this will help you with some of the requests that you have, such as that position, the parent support counselor position being made full-time, and some of the concerns that you have for space, whether it's storage space or space for groups or space that you need to improve.
Yeah, it's program space. Storage space is great, but we probably need that too. Yeah, it's programmatic space and space that's designed for our needs. And thank you. Well, with that, if there are other thoughts, we'll have another shot at it later on the agenda. But I thank you all for your attention and your time and your continued support.
Thanks a lot, Scott. I'd like to turn it over to Jake and Darian for your student reports.
Thanks, Mr. B.
And welcome back. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, so it's good to be back. I had a good nose surgery. I got my septimal straight and narrow now, so we're good to go. So I guess we'll start off just with what's really recent, which is just that we have exams this week. So this is our Trimester Two exams. It's actually a normal exam schedule. So we have our first exam, 7:25, 10-minute break in between exams, and then we have two 2-hour exams every day. So pretty easy, pretty manageable to do. Some classes are choosing not to have exams though. Like today, I had a 2-hour physics class, which was not fun. Um, but I mean, it's just kind of like it depends on the class. Like some classes, like my UConn classes, didn't have exams because it follows the UConn schedule, so it kind of worked out better for that. But other classes are taking advantage of it, so it's kind of whatever's easiest for the teacher, whatever's most manageable, I feel. And then also Darian and I had met with Superintendent Cook, and that was a really cool meeting for us. We kind of got a chance to talk to him and introduce ourselves and just kind of start communicating with him. He said that he's going to be sitting in on our meetings with Mr. Salutary, which is really cool because now we have a really open line of communication with the superintendent. So we're super excited for that. I'm really glad that we got that connection established for Darian too, even when I move on. So I'm hoping that we can maintain that. The next thing I'd say is probably just like a COVID update. That's kind of what Darian and I wanted to do today, was just kind of kind of dive into what it's like to be a teen in COVID right now, because I feel like we do kind of lose that kind of understanding sometimes just because we get so used to falling back into our routines and stuff. We just forget that it's way different than normal. And I think that one of the things that I've kind of really started to learn through COVID is just how normalized trauma is becoming, which is really scary because it's like, wow, like all these things are so real, but like there's a lot that's just like so wrong. And I think a lot of kids are just like realizing that there's just a lot of things in the world that are just not what they should be. There's a lot of kids with eating disorders right now. There's a lot of kids who, they're going to substances when they don't have anything to do. And there's a whole lot to cope with right now and deal with. And it's just not being handled appropriately in a lot of ways. And I know a lot of kids are trying to start exercising regularly, trying to develop like good coping skills, good habits. But a lot of times it's just like a lot and it's overwhelming. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. We have all the COVID stuff, yes, but we've got people dying. We've got kids that we know dying. We've got eating disorders and stuff like that happening. We've got kids falling off the rails with mental health and needing help. And it's so hard to get kids support sometimes because you don't know what to do in every situation. And every situation isn't always black and white where it's, I can go bring this to Derek and Melissa, or I can bring this to Scott. Some things are, things that you need to deal with a little bit on your own. And as, much as we want to say, just like go see them, go talk to them, that's the reality of it. Is I can't go tell Scott everything. I can't tell Derek everything. I can't tell Melissa everything because it's just part of being a teen, I guess, is just kind of learning how to deal with that on your own. But it can be a lot. And I think a lot of kids who are helping others are really feeling the impact on themselves, which is really sad to see because, there's some of these kids that are just putting so much of themselves into others that, that you see the toll it takes on them. And it really is heartbreaking. There's also a good amount of, I'd say, like sexually related violence stuff happening. Like there's a couple of cases of like sexual harassment or assault that have started to kind of come to my attention a little bit more. And that's another thing we kind of started to share with Scott. And it's scary because like there's not a lot that you can do there. And a lot of times, alcohol's the drug, that's the date rape drug. So, I mean, it's hard to avoid alcohol with teenagers sometimes. And, like it's something that happens. So it's an unfortunate thing that we're hoping to kind of get put away where it belongs and not in teenage lives. Along the lines of having to cope with COVID and stuff is just a lot of isolation still too. You get sent home for contact tracing, or you get sent home because, someone else was near them and you're with that person. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to stay cooped up in the house for 14 days. It's hard to pretend like it's okay that you can't see any of your friends. It's hard to pretend that you're okay with not getting an invite to the party, because even though you know that it's because you're at home and contact trace, a part of you will always think that it's because, you know, your friends don't want you there, or, you know, you weren't actually wanted at the party, or someone has a problem with you. You know, it's natural to overthink things, and that's what kids are bound to do when they're kept in their house in isolation. So that's another thing that can be pretty detrimental to youth health. And I definitely think that there's a lot more depression. I mean, Darian was talking to Scott in the meeting about something, and he was just like describing how kids kind of feel like they're unmotivated now, because it's just so hard to maintain that motivation, because so much of school has been so extrinsically motivated for a lot of kids, where it's always been, you know, like you do this and you get reward, you know, like you maintain good grades and like we'll let you play Xbox during the week or something like that. And this year with online school, with assignments that have flexible due dates, with assignments that don't necessarily need to be turned in, you know, right this very second, but eventually need to be, you know, it's hard for kids to find that intrinsic motivation to want to be better, to want to learn, to want to get things done. Kids are looking for the shortcut every chance they get. Cheating's at an all-time high too. I mean, kids aren't learning everything because they're not motivated. They don't want to. They're depressed. You know, they're sitting at their house. They don't have anything to do. They want to have someone to talk to, somewhere to go, and they just can't, because it's the world we live in today. So, I mean, I don't even know how we could work on fixing that, because I think that it's something that just comes along with the pandemic. But again, like me and Darian are trying to just communicate these things that are going on to you guys, just so you guys are aware, because we don't talk about this all the time. And it's really important that we do, because like I said, like the trauma is just so normalized at this point, and it's something that we should be trying to work on denormalizing, because I don't think that it's healthy for kids to keep living like this and thinking that it's okay for this stuff to happen. You know, it's something that makes you lose hope in the world, and we don't want kids to lose hope. And then the last,
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, because I want to keep us moving towards, you know, towards a conclusion, I guess, to our point that I think you're making here. And I just want to make sure that if Darian has something to add to this, we hear from Darian as well about this, you know, about what you're sharing.
Yeah, so we're also looking at a lot of anxiety right now. Obviously, during exams, there's anxiety that's kind of unavoidable, even by the school, by teachers who are honestly, I think, doing a great job of either continuing their class or giving a student a little bit of a break. At least that's my point of view. But there's also a lot of anxiety outside of exams, with, almost like Jake said, seeing a lot of, like, in several classes. In Jake's case, he's doing 6 classes a day, and you see those assignments stack up, and it's just a lot to look at, and it's very difficult. Obviously, that's something that's pretty much unavoidable, but it's very difficult for some students. I also want to be aware of the home life. You know, obviously we're getting towards, or I'm hoping that we're getting towards the end of this whole isolation and you know, difficult times, but sometimes you do see kids taking, or even parents taking, extra jobs to help kids through hard times and help the family through hard times, and kids being stuck in the house, even if it's because they're living with their grandparents right now, or just because they want to keep their parents or grandparents safe. And you know, you always, when you're hanging out with your friend, the last thing you want to think about is the pandemic and the world that's actually around us right now. But it's one of the things that you have to think about the most. You always have to be careful of who you're around. You have to be careful of contact tracing. You know, hockey teams quarantined right now. Was I around anybody on the hockey team? And there's also a lot of grief, and not just with, obviously, the many lost loved ones that a lot of people have lost throughout the year, and whether it's COVID related or not. But there's also little things that seem so much bigger, like a school's field trip that you were looking forward to, or a sports season being canceled. Like, it's these little things that keep us going throughout the day that get canceled. They seem so much bigger in times like this, because we don't have the opportunity to have, like, these the big plans, you know? So all around, I think what I've at least, or what I'm at least trying to say is that like during these times, it's very, very important to be sensitive of other people's problems in their home lives, because we could have no idea what's going on inside their walls. You have to be super, like, especially during these times, careful of what you're saying to certain people and, you know, how it could affect them, because people go through a lot and you just don't know it sometimes. So it's just very difficult these times to know who's in trouble and know who needs help, but it's very important to just be aware of it.
Well said. Jake, I didn't want to cut off your conversation. I did want to just make sure I heard from Darian. So if you want to pick it up from where you were too, if you had anything else you wanted to add.
No, I was just gonna say quickly that the college process is still bad. So
Yeah, still bad.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, you've got the regular stuff, you know, you've got the regular stress of being a senior heading into the third trimester and taking UConn ECE courses and AP courses and trying to get into college, and a pandemic going on and worrying about prom. And, you know, the good news is, you know, from all indications, your administration, your faculty, your advisors really want your senior year to be as close to normal as they can possibly make it without putting everybody at risk. There is, Mr. Hages was in my room today. He's the senior advisor. I'm sure you guys know that if you're seniors. And they're doing something for prom, whatever it is. There will be something, and they're trying to do it within the guidelines of what is safe at this point in time. They haven't ruled out anything from anything, you know, to an outdoor prom. And there are other, you know, they're working really, really hard, and they're aware. We met with the superintendent today as a Daniel Hand faculty, and there's, you know, we are going to be all back in at some point in the near future. That's not a question. And the question, we could argue over which week it's going to be, but you're going to have an option. It's going to be there at some point in time based on what seems to be coming out of parent survey results. I'm not giving away anything. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but there's I don't think I am, based on what I'm hearing. And there's a real strong push to, you know, to pick up the normalcy of what's going on, and a real recognition of what you guys are going through. So.
Just as a senior
Piggybacking,
parent,
oh, sorry, sir.
just as a senior parent, I think the kids appreciate the whole prom and things to look forward to at this point, but it's been very tough to get all your SATs not counted after studying for years and then not be able to take them. Have to look at colleges from a purely virtual perspective. I think the things that these seniors have gone through is way different than anybody can really comprehend. Having to expend $200,000 possibly on a college and pick it without ever seeing anything or watching a commercial about it is very different than actually going in for an interview or going to a campus. I think that there's some validity to what these kids are feeling like. You know, they've now I don't know how many, a lot of kids have already accepted colleges or applied early decision to schools they've never seen. It's very unusual, and it's been very hard for them, and will probably have to make a choice without ever doing so.
Yep. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, Dave, I don't know if you want to take it, or Jake or Darian or Scott. I know personally I'm excited about the possibility of full-time. I know the child that lives in my house that goes to Hand is, but I worry about the kids, you know, who do have things being amplified, whether it be depression or anxiety. You know, I recently was around crowds of people, and even for me, it produced, you know, levels of anxiety after isolation for so long. And, you know, is that a discussion the administration is having? And Jake, how do the kids feel about that?
Well, I mean, I personally like completely understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, I was just like around a lot of other people. I don't even remember where I was, but I was like in close proximity with a bunch of people, and I was just like, oh my God, like like, get away from me. Like, I'm going to like get COVID. Like, I don't want to do this. But like, it's just like, I don't even know. Like, I was like really freaking out about it. And I'm normally just such a social person. It was odd to me because I was like really finding myself finding, anxiety about that stuff. So, I mean, I think that a lot of kids will feel some kind of semblance of that. I mean, I think it'll vary in degrees for each student, depending on, what level of comfort they have, what their experience was with the pandemic, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I really do. I think most kids don't even realize that yet. But I think that they will, because I think that that is something that we all kind of share inertly now, because it's just like the reality that we've kind of gotten used to.
I spent, March, you guys all know we're coming up on the anniversary of the day we went out this Friday. Was the day we went home. So it's just about a year. I spent, from that March until deep into August, pretty much seeing my wife, and that was it, and, came August, I showed up at school, and it was jarring to walk through the door and see people almost immediately in my room talking to me. And it was unnatural. It was creepy. It was scary. And 2 days later, it was normal. And, and then a couple days later, I was met by 500 people, and they were in the building. And so I guess, Jess, the thing is, it's going to feel incredibly strange. It's going to feel scary. And depending on who you are, it's going to go away quickly, or it's not going to go away quickly. And there's going to be a large portion of the population that is going to find it stressful, and there may be a subpopulation that chooses not to come in at all, that was coming in part-time and now has decided that, it's not something that they're going to do. I don't think it doesn't sound like that'll be a huge number, but I don't think we'll know until it happens. And I think teachers will have to be very aware of that. We're not going to, there will be, I've heard nothing that says that option is ever going to go away this year. Next year is a whole nother animal, but for this year, anybody that wants to remain at home is going to have that as an option. And I think we're just going to have to be prepared that there are going to be some very nervous people that haven't been in school for a while, and certainly haven't been in a classroom. So my classroom, I happen to have younger students, and they tend to be coming to school a lot more than the older students. And I'll walk by classrooms and see 2-3 students in there. It's very rare. And in my situation, but a lot of the other classes, I think it's going to be a pretty big change for people. It's a great
Personally,
question.
Adding in the student perspective, I'm looking forward to all in. I'm speaking for myself when I say I'm a healthy youth, so I'm not as at high risk as maybe some of the other students, and I'm aware of that. And I'm looking at it as an opportunity to really, see my friends again. I know I won't be able to be as social as I may have been last year, but still, like, being able to see all my friends in one classroom, I haven't had that opportunity in, well, literally just about a year. And I'm really looking forward to it. That, and I've also found personally that online school is much more difficult for me. So I end up doing most of my work, especially in classes like especially like classes in chem and math, where you have to really be paying attention the whole time in order to, pass your quiz and understand what's happening. So it's very difficult for me personally to do that in the 2 or 3 days that I'm in school. So if for whatever reason we don't end up going all in, so be it. I'll be able to live my life, but I really think that going all in will, make everybody, I think that grades will be polished off. I think that, people will be visibly happier again, and I'm really just looking forward to that opportunity.
Well said.
I personally do hope that they allow kids to kind of choose their own hybrid model too, where it's something maybe like you get to kind of choose which days you want to go in and which days you don't, because, like, I don't know, maybe a different schedule other than like your normal like cohort schedule would like work better for some kids. Like, I don't know, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, stay home, Tuesday, Thursday, go in, or some sort of like transition into it to kind of like make you feel a little less overwhelmed by it. So it's kind of like dipping your toe in the water before you kind of go all the way back.
Just as long as it's not test day, we stay home, and all other days we go in.
Yeah,
You know,
because
so-
I mean, personally, I've been all virtual. So like I haven't been in school since December. So like even just being in school like one day would be like bizarre for me, and my legs would be super tired from the start.
Well, like I said, I'm not the superintendent or the principal, but I would be surprised if we weren't all in based on what the superintendent is sharing with us and sharing with the community at board meetings. So I'm not saying anything out of school in this. You know, personally, I wish it was 2 weeks after my second vaccine. I'm not so sure it will be, but you know, at least it's after my first vaccine. So, and I think all teachers are on schedule to, I think, have their first vaccines by I want to say next week. Yeah, next Thursday. So, anything else on the conversation?
I just have one more question. I think it's probably more for Scott. And you don't need to give me specifics, but I am concerned about I don't know any of them, but the hockey team's been in quarantine 3 times, which is 14 days times 3. Are we concerned about those kids and their well-being? And is there anything that can be done, you know, from a youth services in combination with school to just make sure them in particular, they're okay?
So nobody's reached out to me about any specific concerns about the hockey team. I mean, generally when we're getting asked, you know, for support or to weigh in on something, it's coming from parents or it's coming from administrators. You know, but if you know families that are connected with those students, you know, please share with them about youth services, that we're here if they want to just talk. I think that's the thing where parents may not always think about just that they can talk to us confidentially and just run by scenarios or run by, you know, things that they're observing in their kids. And I think we do quite a bit of that. And we can be very helpful that way. Sometimes the decision of like does someone need more attention for a mental health need, you know, can come up out of that conversation.
Okay, great. I will do that.
Scott, do you know if any mental health counseling is offered when a student is put in quarantine?
I think that it's more understood that it's you know, that it's an option, but no, I don't know that they specifically reach out to people to say that you know, that they should or they can.
Is that something that you would talk to TJ about and maybe suggest that he you know, like give them Erin's number or you know,
give them our number.
I
think part of what's happened, and so first of all, thank you, Jake and Darian, for you know, sharing your experiences and for sharing them as honestly as I think you both did. And this similar experience is not the same, but you know, these are stories, very similar stories that we hear when people are applying for mental health services. I imagine Sarah, who's a provider, Pam, who's a provider, you're hearing similar things. What I think part of what's happened that's made this so challenging, first of all, like Jake said, it's been normalized. So like we've all had to deal with a collective trauma, a change that's overwhelmed our abilities to cope. And so we all find our own ways to do that and find our own sort of baseline. And I think so where people might have thought a level of symptoms, mental health symptoms, if it were here, and like that was the threshold that I would seek help with. Now everybody's there. You know, that threshold, I think, for people where they might consider seeking services, since everybody's so wiped out, is now there. And helping people understand, you know, you still can reach out and deal with things at this level, but in many cases, since the despair and the difficulty is so normal, you know, I think people are just sort of accepting that this is part of their reality and finding ways to cope. Now, that's actually adaptive in some ways. So imagine, you know, for people that have had to live through like wars and famine and really catastrophic, you know, natural events in their lives, you find trauma survivors that have dealt with situations, their own trauma to survive and then hope to heal and get to a better place. And I think it's a very similar thing that we're dealing with now. So people are trying to survive. They're in survival mode. And one piece that I find myself coming back to, we need to make space for these stories and listen very intently and work with people around, as they vent, but also where we can support them or help them develop some skills to cope with what they're doing. Obviously, the solution is getting back to normal. Everybody was just saying and that'll come with its change. But the one thing I want us all to hang on to and remember, young people are incredibly resilient and adaptive. And the one thing that we know over and over and over again is that they follow where adults feel that they can provide them with safety and security. And I know all of us as adults, we're not all feeling really great about how this is going either. But I think, we've all found a way to sort of forge ahead collectively. And I think the students are too, for the stories that we hear of all the awfulness, which is there. We also hear stories of how kids have found new ways to cope and adapt. And we need to keep that balanced. And we need, whenever we're talking with people, their ability, the young people's ability, all of our abilities to adapt to the new normal, to overcome what we have is really part of also our human experience. And that's what's going to pull us through. And I'll just stop there.
Mr. Buller, I can actually add to that.
Go for it, Jay.
Darian and I did actually talk to Superintendent Cook about that, and actually specifically about students that were staying full remote. We're just kind of discussing like how students are kind of like dealing with their own mental health and, like what things are being put in place, that kind of stuff. And I expressed to him that I was worried that there wasn't any reach out to kids who were full remote or kids that got quarantined. And, I was like, there's really nothing that's going on. And I really communicated with him that I think that guidance counselors would be a really essential, figure in this kind of relationship of just checking in on students, especially the ones that they know are full remote or quarantined, because they're the ones that have like such good access to that kind of info. So I think that it would be probably most beneficial to utilize guidance counselors just because MYFS doesn't have access to see who's even quarantined and stuff. So, and I mean, a guidance counselor, they're supposed to know who you are already. And then it's just a nice and simple email, just like, hey, how you doing? You want to jump on a video conference at some point this week? Do you want to just, send an email back and forth? Like, how you doing? What's going on? How's college? But I really did express to them that I was really not too fond of the fact that there isn't that already, and that guidance counselors weren't doing enough for students, in my opinion, in just like the communication with teachers and stuff like that. So that was just one of the things that we kind of touched upon.
I appreciate you sharing that with him. Hopefully that'll lead to some action. Any other comments on the topic? All right, hang in there, you two. All right. Yeah, like that's going to make a huge difference in your life, but hang in there, you two. Scott, I feel like we haven't heard enough from you yet, so I was wondering if you could provide a director's report to us.
A quick one.
Okay.
So we did at the top of this meeting I asked Molly for dates on QPR. We're doing QPR training into the community. So we're doing more of a general community presentation on QPR on March 18th. That's at 6 p.m. These are all virtual. And we've been invited by the PTOs and had discussions with the specific PTOs for Daniel Hand and PTO and Polson. So March 23rd, 8 a.m., one that's focused for the Daniel Hand PTO, and anyone can join, but it's focused in that direction. And on April 22nd will be the Polson PTO at 6:30 at night. And some not so great news, as if we needed more not great news. We have 2 staff members that are leaving us at the end of this year, and both from the same sort of area. So Derek Cornwell is resigning, and His wife, very fortunately, and because she's brilliant, got a job in Virginia. Their family is all in Virginia. And as I think most of you know, Derek just had a little girl, Zoe. And, I think there's a big pull for them to go back and be around family in Virginia. So he's being very selfish and not listening to us, but he is wrapping up and will be on his way probably he'll still be doing some virtual work here, we hope, through the month of May, but then move by probably early June. And Katie Voles, who some of you may know as a parent. She works for us as a youth development coordinator, part-time. She does a lot of peer helper work, so she takes half the peer helper trainings. She was running our mentoring program. She was doing violence prevention at the high school. So for her small amount of hours, was carrying quite a bit of weight for the programming. And I tell you, if you haven't ever had a chance to talk to Katie, she's a phenomenal person. She's brilliant. She's endlessly empathetic towards all humans, and her impact on her kids here. I think she's pretty well known throughout the community too, as a parent. She's just great. And I can't say enough about Derek. He's just peer advocates, safe rides, working with me on Guide Talk. He developed all of our boys council. We had no boys council groups. We now have them in 4 different grades. And I'm really worried about what's going to happen to that, because I'm the only other male here, and I can't take that work on. So Katie will be leaving also by the end of the school year. So this just was announced this week, and we're still working out some of the fine details, but we'll be posting a couple jobs.
Wow, Scott, those are
yeah.
big losses.
Yeah.
Are you able to say with Katie, is she staying locally or?
So Katie also is going with a spouse who got another job to California. They're moving to California, and it may be temporary. This is they're kind of approaching it as a trial, and we don't know. I mean, I think we'll still have to fill the position and figure out if it's something we can keep as maybe a year, see if she comes back, or it'll just have to be that we fill the position and then see what happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both huge losses for us. And Derek has filled a void that is going to be hard to fill. I mean, with the boys.
Yep.
So, when do those positions automatically open up and you can refill them as soon as they've given notice, or do you have to go through a process to get them approved?
So they're budgeted in next year, assuming the budget passes, which hasn't yet.
Right.
So we should not have an issue with that. We should be able to, once their notice is in, and we can kind of get on the same page with our HR department, get the positions posted and start recruiting. Actually, Derek's position is one, if you compare it to other YSBs, is actually paid pretty well. So when we've gone through the recruiting process before, we actually do get quite a bit of a response for applications. So we're optimistic that we're going to get some good candidates. Katie's job's a little harder to fill because it's a small amount of hours. So really, it's a good person, the right fit, but also then somebody who just wants part-time work, and and is still willing to put their heart and soul in it. So that's what you have with Katie. That's and that's gold when you find it. So we'll post them and we'll recruit and.
Well, you had a good year there where you didn't have to do too much recruiting. Now you're back at it.
And Scott, those are different. Scott, those are different than the positions that were just posted for I think they were clinicians that were just posted. Is that?
Oh, so we're also recruiting to get some more contractual clinicians, as everybody,
Okay.
We're capped out on being able to provide more services. So our only way to develop more capacity is to get contractual people. So we're recruiting for that, and hoping to get we've been able to move our interns through almost like a pipeline now, where our interns graduate. If they don't have jobs or some direction that they're going in, they've taken on some clinical work. So again, small amounts, but it helps us, have a team and have options and resources. And that's it for my report. And change is inevitable. We'll deal.
Yes, we will. It's all right. We'll move on. Sergeant York, are you available for a liaison report? Do you happen to be?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we don't really have much to share news with the police department. Like you said, we're all vaccinated, and we're probably about 80-90% of the officers chose to get vaccines. So we're happy about that. I'm glad to hear about the teachers getting vaccines, because like my wife and I say, we are so happy that our 6-year-old gets to go to Ryerson every day. And I hope everyone, could experience that, especially the high school kids and everything. But yeah, just as, we're gearing up, we don't really know yet if, about the summer activities with the fireworks and everything, even though I heard there might be rumors about that. So I think we're, just standing by to see whether or not the big festivities are going to happen this year. So that's kind of where we are right now. Just gonna, get ready to the transition to the warmer months and go from there. But that's pretty much all I have to report right now.
Well, thank you very much, and appreciate you always being there when we have no other liaisons here to provide your report. But you're always right there with it.
No problem.
I don't really have any formal chairperson comments, but I did want to just take a second to suggest everybody take a moment this week to reflect on the past year. Like, we need a reminder that we have been in this crazy world for a year. But this has been obviously a year like no other. Every cliche that's ever been said has been said about this year. But there's been some good that's come out of it. And there's always good that comes out of really tough challenges. And try and find a way to reflect on some of the good that's come out of this past year, whether it's something in your personal life or in the life of somebody near you. That's what I'm going to try and do when I think back on this year. And I'll take a little bit of time this weekend to kind of thank my lucky stars for my health and my family's health, and the relative way we've made it for the past year, and hope that you're able to do that as well. On that note, I'd like to open it up to any discussion or any comments that anybody has, whether you're on the board or an elected board member, or even just, not even just, or a non-elected member. This is not a shy group. I've got good hang time. We can stay here for a while. You're testing me. All right, well, hearing none and providing 10 seconds of hang time, and having made it through all the business, we'll say that the meeting's adjourned. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.